William Torrence stood at the border outpost with sweat sliding down his spine, despite the autumn chill, staring at the sealed parchment that had just upended his entire existence. The ink was still fresh where the Duke's seal pressed into crimson wax, and the words seemed to blur and sharpen with each frantic reread. By order of the Treaty of Grey River, he was to be wed to an orc woman from the northern clans within 3 days' time. His hands trembled as he looked up at the courier, a thin man with tired eyes who clearly wanted nothing more than to deliver his message and flee back to civilization. "There must be some mistake," William said, though his voice lacked conviction. "I'm just a border guard. My father was a farmer before the war took him. I'm nobody." The courier shook his head. "No mistake. Every unmarried man between 18 and 35 along the border was entered into the lottery. Your name was drawn. The treaty requires 50 marriages this year to cement the peace between our peoples. You should feel honored to serve your kingdom." Honored. William wanted to laugh, but the sound died in his throat. He had seen orcs before, of course, during the skirmishes before the treaty. Green-skinned warriors with tusks and eyes that burned with fury, cutting through human soldiers like wheat before a scythe. He had nightmares about them still, 3 years after the fighting had stopped. And now he was expected to marry one, to bring her into his small cabin at the edge of the thornwood, to share his life with a creature he had been taught to fear since childhood. "She arrives in 3 days, the courier continued, already backing toward his horse. "You are to prepare your home and present yourself at the crossing stones when the sun reaches its peak. The ceremony will be conducted by both human and orc witnesses. Refusal means execution for breaking the treaty. I suggest you make your peace with this, guardsman." Then he was gone, leaving William alone with the parchment and the sound of his own ragged breathing. The next 3 days passed in a blur of frantic preparation and mounting dread. William scrubbed every inch of his cabin until the wooden floors gleamed, fixed the leaking spot in the roof he had been ignoring for months, and purchased new linens from the trading post with coins he could barely afford to spend. His fellow guards offered condolences that felt more like funeral rites, and the local villagers whispered behind their hands whenever he passed. "I heard the orc women eat their husbands if they displeased them," old Martha from the mill said, not quietly enough. "Nonsense," replied the blacksmith, though his voice carried no real confidence. "They just work them to death in the fields. Orc women are stronger than 3 men combined." William tried to shut out the gossip, but it wormed into his mind during the long, sleepless nights. What would she look like? Would she despise him on sight? Would she be cruel or simply indifferent? He imagined tusks and claws, imagined being torn apart for some unknown transgression against Orcish custom. By the 3rd morning, he had packed a small bag twice, considering running, before unpacking it again with shaking hands. He was many things, but he was not a coward. He would face this fate with whatever dignity he could muster. The sun was climbing toward noon when William made his way to the crossing stones, ancient markers that divided human land from the territory the orcs had claimed in the treaty. A small crowd had gathered, mostly curious villagers and a stern-faced priest who would officiate the human side of the ceremony. Across the border stood a group of orcs, their green skin vivid against the golden autumn grass. They were tall and powerfully built, wearing leather and fur despite the mild weather, and William's stomach clenched with remembered fear. One orc stepped forward, a woman with silver braids and a scar across her broad nose. She spoke in the common tongue, though her accent was thick. "We bring Zara Jorah, daughter of the Iron Peak clan, to be wed according to the treaty. Where is the human who will join with her?" William forced his feet to move, crossing the invisible line between spectators and participants. "I am William Torrence," he said, proud that his voice barely wavered. "I am here to fulfill the treaty's demands." The scarred orc woman studied him with dark eyes that missed nothing, and he resisted the urge to look away. Finally, she nodded. "Then let us proceed. Zara, come forward." From behind the group of orcs, a figure emerged. She was veiled completely in deep green cloth that hid every feature, and she moved with a grace that surprised William. She was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with a strong build visible even through the modest robes she wore. He could see nothing of her face, nothing of the woman he was about to bind himself to for the rest of his life. The ceremony was mercifully brief. The priest recited words about duty and honor and the binding of 2 peoples in holy matrimony. The scarred orc woman spoke in her own language, guttural and rhythmic, about strength and survival and the forging of new paths. William repeated the vows he was told to say, and across from him, the veiled figure did the same, her voice muffled by the cloth but surprisingly soft. Then, the priest was pronouncing them wed, and the orc woman was being guided across the boundary stones to stand beside William. The scarred orc met his eyes one final time. "Treat her with honor, human, or the treaty will not protect you from our wrath." Then the orcs were leaving, disappearing back into the grasslands, and the human villagers were dispersing with sidelong glances and muttered prayers. William stood frozen, suddenly aware that he was alone with his new wife, a stranger beneath green cloth, and he had no idea what to do next. "We should go to my home," he finally managed. "It is not far. You must be tired from your journey." She nodded, a small movement, but said nothing. William led the way down the dirt path toward his cabin, hyper-aware of her presence behind him. She moved silently despite her size, and several times he glanced back just to confirm she was still there. Each time, he found her veiled head turned slightly, as if she were studying the landscape, cataloging every tree and stone. When they reached the cabin, William pushed open the door and gestured her inside. She paused at the threshold, and he wondered if there was some orcish custom he was violating, but then she stepped through and looked around the single room that would now be their shared space. He had tried to make it welcoming, had placed wildflowers in a chipped vase on the table, and laid out bread and cheese for a wedding meal he suspected neither of them would be able to stomach. "You can remove your veil now," William said quietly. "If you wish. This is your home now, too." She stood very still for a long moment, and William could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then her hands, large and green with surprisingly elegant fingers, rose to the edge of the veil. She lifted it slowly, revealing herself inch by inch, and William forgot how to breathe. She was beautiful. The thought struck him like a physical blow, unexpected and undeniable. Her skin was indeed green, the color of spring leaves, and small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, but they only emphasized the elegant shape of her mouth. Her eyes were golden, bright, and wary like a wild animal assessing a potential threat, framed by thick lashes. High cheekbones and a strong jaw gave her face a regal quality, and her hair, which tumbled free as she removed the veil completely, was the color of dark honey, falling in waves past her shoulders. She met his stare with one of her own, and he saw her assessment, saw the way she catalogued his features with the same careful attention he was giving hers. He knew what she would see. A man of middling height with brown hair that never quite stayed neat, gray eyes that his mother had once called storm-colored, a scar on his chin from a childhood fall. Nothing special, nothing remarkable, certainly nothing worthy of the woman standing before him. "I am Zara," she said finally, and her voice without the veil was rich and clear, with only a slight accent rounding the edges of her words. "I suppose you already know this from the ceremony." "William," he replied automatically, then felt foolish. "But you know that too." A silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy. Zara set her veil carefully on the chair, then looked around the cabin again. "It is clean," she observed. "You prepared for my arrival." "I did not want you to think I was slovenly," William admitted. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly aware of how small his home must seem to her. "I know this is not what you would have chosen. I know you must hate this situation, but I swear to you I will not be cruel. I will not force myself upon you. You will have your own space, and we will find a way to live together that does not bring you pain." Zara's golden eyes widened slightly, and something flickered across her face too quickly for him to identify. "You fear me," she said. It was not a question. William considered lying, but what would be the point? "I have reason to fear your people," he said carefully, "just as you have reason to fear mine. I was in the border wars. I saw what orc warriors could do." "And I saw what human soldiers did to my cousin's village," Zara replied, her voice hardening. "I saw the burned homes and the children's graves. So yes, William Torrence, we both have reasons for fear. But I did not come here to hurt you. I came because my clan needed this alliance, and because I was chosen, and because I thought perhaps I could be brave enough to try." The honesty in her words struck something deep in William's chest. He nodded slowly. "Then we will both try. That is all we can do." The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. She moved to the table, looking at the bread and cheese he had laid out. "May I eat? I have not had food since dawn." "Of course. This is your home. You need never ask permission for such things." She sat, and after a moment, William joined her. They ate in silence, but it was a more comfortable quiet now, born of mutual exhaustion rather than hostility. William found himself stealing glances at her profile, at the way the afternoon light through the window turned her green skin luminous, at the careful way she tore the bread into small pieces before eating it. She caught him looking once, and he flushed and looked away, but he thought he saw the corner of her mouth quirk upward. When the meal was finished, William showed her the cabin's meager amenities, the wash basin, the small stove, the chest where she could keep her belongings. He offered her the bed, insisting he would make a pallet by the fire, and though she protested initially, she eventually accepted with visible relief. That night, William lay awake on his makeshift bed, listening to Zara's breathing from across the room. She did not sleep either, he could tell by the way she shifted and sighed. They were two strangers bound together by politics and fear, trying to find peace in an impossible situation. But when he finally drifted off, his last thought was of golden eyes and the surprising beauty of a face he had expected to find monstrous. The first weeks of their marriage fell into an uneasy rhythm. William continued his duties at the outpost, patrolling the border and checking on travelers, while Zara remained at the cabin. He returned each evening expecting to find her sullen or angry, but instead, she had always prepared a meal with the provisions he left, and the cabin was tidier than he had ever kept it. They spoke little at first, exchanging only necessary information about supplies and schedules. But gradually, in increments so small William barely noticed, they began to share more. Zara mentioned that she had been a scout for her clan, and that she missed the freedom of ranging through the wild places. William admitted that he had wanted to be a scholar before the war, and that he still read every book he could trade for at the outpost. One evening, he came home to find Zara outside, her hands buried in the soil of the small garden plot he had been neglecting. She had cleared the weeds and was planting seeds she had somehow acquired from the trading post. "Winter comes soon," she explained when she saw his surprised expression. "We will need vegetables to supplement the dried goods. In my clan, everyone maintains a garden. It is shameful to waste good land." William knelt beside her, feeling inadequate. "I am not good with growing things. My father tried to teach me, but I always killed more plants than I cultivated." Zara's lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Then I will teach you. Here, press the soil like this, firmly but not so hard that you crush the seed. Give it darkness and water and time, and it will grow." Their hands brushed in the dirt, and William felt an unexpected jolt at the contact. Zara pulled back quickly, and he did the same, both of them suddenly focused intently on their planting. But something had shifted between them, some invisible barrier cracking ever so slightly. Another week passed, and then another. The autumn deepened, bringing cold winds and the first frost. William started returning to the cabin earlier, drawn by the warmth of the fire and the surprising pleasure of Zara's company. She had begun to relax around him, and he discovered that she was clever and observant, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard. "You hold your sword wrong," she said one evening as he was cleaning his blade by the firelight. William bristled defensively. "I've been trained since I was 15. I hold it perfectly well." "For a human style, perhaps. But you leave your left side vulnerable. Any orc warrior would gut you in the first exchange." She stood and held out her hand. "May I?" He hesitated, then handed her the sword. She took it with easy familiarity, adjusting her grip, and performed a series of movements so fluid and precise that William could only stare. She moved like water, like wind, each strike perfectly balanced and devastatingly efficient. "This is how we fight," she said, offering the sword back to him, "not with brute strength, but with leverage and speed. Your people think we are savage, but there is art in our combat, just as there is art in yours." "Teach me," William said impulsively. "Show me how to fight as you do." Zara's golden eyes searched his face, looking for mockery or deception. Finding neither, she nodded. "Very well. But you must promise to be a dedicated student. I do not waste my time on the lazy." Thus began a new pattern to their evenings. After the meal was cleared, they would move outside if the weather permitted, and Zara would drill him in orcish combat techniques. She was a demanding teacher, accepting no excuses and offering praise so rarely that William treasured each small nod of approval. But he improved rapidly under her tutelage, his movements becoming more confident and controlled. One night they were sparring with wooden practice swords Zara had carved when William managed to successfully execute a complex defensive sequence she had been teaching him for days. Zara laughed, a bright, genuine sound that transformed her entire face, and William found himself laughing too, both of them breathless and exhilarated. "You learn quickly when you actually pay attention," Zara said, but there was warmth in her voice now, affection even. "I have excellent motivation," William replied, and was rewarded with a smile that made his heart stutter in his chest. They stood there in the starlight, wooden swords lowered, and William realized with stunning clarity that he was falling in love with his wife. The woman who was supposed to be his enemy, his burden, his cross to bear for the sake of peace, had become the person he most wanted to see, to talk to be near. The revelation should have terrified him, but instead, it felt like coming home after a long and difficult journey. But he said nothing, because he could not imagine that Zara felt the same. She was only making the best of an impossible situation, finding ways to pass the time with the human she had been forced to marry. He would not burden her with feelings she could not reciprocate. The first snow came in early November, fat flakes that transformed the world into something clean and new. William woke to find Zara already up, standing at the window and watching the snow fall with an expression he could not read. "Is something wrong?" he asked, rising from his pallet. She shook her head. "I was just thinking of my clan. We celebrate the first snow with a feast and songs. My sister would be braiding ribbons into the children's hair, and my mother would be making her honey cakes." Her voice was wistful, heavy with homesickness. William felt a pang of guilt. He had been so focused on his own adjustment to their marriage that he had not fully considered what Zara had sacrificed. She had left behind her entire family, her whole world, to live in exile with a human stranger. "Tell me about them," he said softly. "Your family. I want to know." So Zara spoke, haltingly at first and then with growing animation, about her mother who could track any creature through the wilderness, her father who was a master craftsman, her younger sister who was training to be a healer. She spoke of the great gatherings where the clans would meet to trade and share stories, of the northern mountains where she had been born, of the traditions and songs and history of her people. William listened, fascinated, and when she finally fell silent, he shared his own stories. He spoke of his parents, both dead now, and the small farm where he had grown up. He told her about learning to read from the village priest, about the day the war came and changed everything, about his dreams of a life beyond the border outpost. They talked until the fire burned low and the snow piled high against the windows, and William felt closer to Zara than he had ever felt to another human being. When they finally retired for the night, he lay on his pallet wishing he had the courage to cross the small distance between them and ask if he could simply hold her hand. 2 days later, everything changed. William was returning from his patrol, his thoughts pleasantly occupied with whether Zara would want to practice combat forms that evening, when he saw the smoke. Black and oily, rising from the direction of his cabin. His heart seized with terror, and he broke into a run, his hand on his sword hilt. He burst into the clearing to find 3 men on horseback, circling his cabin. One held a torch, clearly preparing to set the roof alight. Through the window, William could see Zara backed into a corner, her face defiant even in fear. "What is the meaning of this?" William roared, stepping into view with his sword drawn. The men turned, and he recognized them with sinking dread, border raiders, human outlaws who preyed on isolated homesteads. The leader, a scarred man named Garrett Voss, grinned nastily. Well, if it is not the orc lover himself. We heard about the treaty marriages, heard about the traitors who would pollute human bloodlines with monster spawn. We have come to cleanse your household of its filth." "You will leave now," William said, his voice deadly calm despite the fear coursing through him, "or I will cut you down where you sit." Garrett laughed. "Brave words from one man facing 3. Tell you what, we will make this easy. Step aside, let us burn the monster out, and we will let you live. You can tell everyone the orc ran away, and no one will be the wiser." "She is my wife," William said, positioning himself between the raiders and the cabin, bound by law and treaty, and I will die before I let you harm her. Garrett's expression turned ugly. So be it, traitor. The raiders dismounted, drawing their weapons. William knew he was outmatched, knew he would likely die in the next few minutes, but he also knew he would fight with everything he had. For Zara. For the woman who had taught him to see beyond his prejudices, who had become his partner and his friend, and something far more precious than he had dared name. The first raider came at him fast, a young man with more enthusiasm than skill. William used the techniques Zara had taught him, sidestepping and using the man's momentum against him, striking with the pommel of his sword to send the raider sprawling. But the other two attacked in tandem, and William found himself defending desperately, unable to mount any offense. A blade sliced across his shoulder, burning hot, and William stumbled. Garrett moved in for the kill, his sword raised high. William closed his eyes, thinking of golden eyes and the smile he had only just begun to earn. Then, the door to the cabin exploded outward. Zara burst through like a force of nature, armed with the iron fire poker and William's spare hunting knife. She was magnificent and terrifying, her face set in lines of absolute fury. She caught Garrett's descending blade with the poker, metal shrieking against metal, and drove her knee into his stomach with enough force to double him over. "You dare threaten my husband?" she snarled, and her voice carried the weight of generations of orcish warriors behind it. The young raider William had knocked down was trying to rise. Zara spun, her movement precise and economical, and struck him across the temple with the poker. He dropped like a stone. The third raider, seeing his companions falling, turned and ran for the horses. Garrett, still gasping for breath, tried to slash at Zara's legs. She leaped over the blade with impossible grace and brought both weapons down in a cross that caught him between the shoulder blades. He fell forward into the snow and did not rise. The entire fight had taken perhaps 30 seconds. Zara whirled to face William, her golden eyes wide with concern. "You are bleeding. How badly are you hurt?" "It is nothing," William said, though his shoulder throbbed viciously. "Just a scratch. Zara, you were incredible. You saved my life." "Of course I did," she said, as if there had never been any question. "You are my husband. Did you think I would let them kill you?" She crossed to him, her hands surprisingly gentle as she examined his wound. The touch of her fingers on his skin sent shivers through him that had nothing to do with the cold or the pain. He looked down at her bent head, at the concentration on her face as she tore a strip from her tunic to bind his shoulder, and the words spilled out before he could stop them. "I love you, Zara." Her hands stilled. She looked up slowly, her golden eyes searching his face. "What did you say?" "I love you," William repeated, his heart hammering so hard he was sure she could hear it. "I know I have no right to say it. I know you were forced into this marriage, that you never chose me and probably never would have, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. You have become everything to me. Your laughter, your strength, your mind, the way you look at the world. I love you, and if you can never feel the same, I will understand, but I needed you to know." Zara's eyes glistened with sudden tears. "You foolish, wonderful man," she whispered. "Do you truly not know? Have you not seen it?" "Seen what?" "That I have been falling in love with you since the day you offered me your bed and made yourself uncomfortable on the floor. Since you asked to learn my ways instead of demanding I adopt yours. Since you listened to my stories and shared your dreams and looked at me like I was beautiful instead of monstrous." She cupped his face with both hands, her touch reverent. "I love you, William Torrence. I love you so much it frightens me." William could not speak, could not think, could only lean down and kiss her with all the pent-up longing of the past weeks. Zara kissed him back fiercely, her arms wrapping around him, and it was perfect and right and everything he had never dared to hope for. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Zara rested her forehead against his. "What do we do about them?" she asked, gesturing to the unconscious raiders. William looked at Garrett and his companion, then at the third man who was disappearing over the ridge without his horse. "We take them to the outpost for justice. They attacked a treaty marriage, which is a crime against both our peoples. And then we send word to your clan that you are safe and well, and that your husband knows how lucky he is." Zara smiled, fierce and bright. "I am the lucky one. You gave me a home when I expected only duty. You gave me your heart when I expected only tolerance." "We gave each other a chance," William corrected. "That is all it ever takes, a chance and the courage to see beyond what we have been taught to fear." They bound the raiders and secured them in the small shed behind the cabin. William's shoulder required proper stitching, which Zara performed with steady hands and surprising skill learned from her healer sister. As she worked, William told her about his plans for expanding the cabin come spring, about clearing more land for a larger garden, perhaps even for a few chickens or a goat. "You speak as if I will still be here," Zara said quietly, tying off the final stitch. William caught her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "I speak as if you are my wife and my partner, and I hope you will choose to stay. Not because of the treaty, not because of duty, but because you want to build a life with me." "I do want that," Zara said, her voice thick with emotion, "more than I have ever wanted anything. But William, there will be others like those men. Humans who hate our union, orcs who see me as a traitor to my kind. The path ahead will not be easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," William replied. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "But we face it together. Your strength and my stubbornness. I like our odds." Zara laughed, that bright, wonderful sound that he loved so much. "Your stubbornness? I have wrestled mountain goats more yielding than you," says the woman who spent 3 hours teaching me a single sword form because I could not get the footwork right. "You were putting your left foot forward when any fool could see it should be the right." They bickered fondly as they cleaned up the aftermath of the fight, as they prepared and ate a late dinner, as they finally settled in for the night. But this time, William did not make his pallet by the fire. Instead, he joined Zara in the bed they would now share, holding her close and marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "I never thought I would be grateful for the treaty," Zara murmured into the darkness. "It took me from my family, from everything I knew, but it brought me to you. The best things in life often come disguised as burdens," William said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Like a veiled orc woman at the crossing stones, who I expected to be my doom and turned out to be my salvation. You lost your heart when I lifted my veil? The moment I saw your face, I was gone. I just did not realize it yet." Zara shifted to look at him, her golden eyes luminous in the firelight. "Then we are well matched, husband, because you have had my heart since you promised not to hurt me and actually kept your word." They kissed again, slow and sweet, a promise and a beginning. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in silence. The raiders would be dealt with in the morning, and there would be challenges ahead, prejudices to face and battles to fight, both literal and metaphorical. But for now, in the warm safety of their cabin, William and Zara had everything they needed: each other, and the fierce love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. The next morning, William and Zara transported the raiders to the outpost. Captain Hendricks, William's superior officer, was furious when he heard what had happened. He immediately dispatched riders to both the human duke and the orc clan leaders, reporting the attack on a treaty marriage and demanding swift justice. "This will not stand," Hendricks said grimly. "The whole point of the treaty was to build bridges between our peoples. Anyone who threatens that peace will face the full weight of the law." Within days, word spread throughout the border region. The raiders were tried publicly and sentenced to hard labor rebuilding villages that had been destroyed in the war. More importantly, the story of how an orc woman and her human husband had fought side by side to defend their home became something of a legend. Other treaty couples, isolated and struggling with their own forced marriages, heard the tale and took heart. If love could bloom in the frozen cabin of William Torrence and Zara Jorah, perhaps it could bloom for them as well. As winter deepened, William and Zara settled into their new life as a truly married couple. The awkwardness and wariness that had defined their early weeks together melted away, replaced by easy affection and deepening intimacy. They learned each other's rhythms and quirks, the small habits and preferences that make up a shared life. Zara taught William more than just combat techniques. She showed him how to read the tracks of animals in the snow, how to move through the forest without disturbing the wildlife, how to find edible plants even in the dead of winter. She shared the stories and songs of her people, teaching him Orcish words and phrases, painting a picture of a culture far richer and more complex than he had ever imagined. In turn, William taught Zara to read and write in the human script, opening up his small collection of books to her eager mind. She devoured tales of history and philosophy, poetry and science, asking countless questions and offering perspectives that challenged and delighted him. They would sit by the fire for hours, debating ideas and sharing thoughts, building an intellectual intimacy that matched their growing physical one. On the longest night of winter, the solstice celebration, Zara prepared a feast in the tradition of her people. She had traded at the outpost for special ingredients, using recipes her mother had taught her. The cabin filled with rich, unfamiliar scents, and William found himself overwhelmed by the effort she had put into recreating a piece of her home for him. "This is beautiful," he said, looking at the spread of roasted meat, spiced vegetables, and sweet cakes drizzled with honey. "Zara, you did not have to go to such trouble." "I wanted to," she replied, taking his hands. "I wanted to share this part of my heritage with you. If we are to build a life together, it cannot be only human traditions and customs. It must be a blending of both our worlds." They ate and drank, and Zara taught William the solstice songs of her clan, her voice rising pure and strong in the small cabin. William harmonized as best he could, his rougher human voice weaving with hers, and it felt like a prayer, like a promise, like the forging of something entirely new. After the meal, they exchanged gifts. William had carved Zara a bow from ash wood, the craftsmanship crude but earnest, decorated with careful patterns he had copied from her descriptions of Orcish designs. Zara's eyes shone as she tested the draw, nodding with approval. "It is well made," she said. "You are learning, husband." Her gift to him was a new cloak, sewn from thick wool she had somehow acquired and dyed the deep green of her clan's colors. She had embroidered the edges with both human and Orcish symbols, twining them together in an intricate pattern. "So that all who see you will know you are wed to an orc, and proud of it," she explained. William put it on immediately, ignoring the fact that it was far too warm for indoor wear. "I am proud," he said fiercely, "prouder than I have ever been of anything in my life. You are my wife, my partner, my love, and I will wear this cloak every day so the whole world knows I belong to you." "As I belong to you," Zara said, pulling him close. "My heart, my home, my future. All of it is yours, William Torrence." They made love that night with a passion and tenderness that left them both breathless, their bodies entwined as the solstice fire burned low. And William thought that he had never been happier, never felt more complete, than in this moment with his Orcish wife in his arms and the promise of countless tomorrows stretching ahead. Winter gradually loosened its grip, and spring arrived with a riot of green growth and birdsong. The garden Zara had planted in the fall began to sprout, tender shoots pushing up through the thawed earth. William and Zara worked side by side, expanding the plot and adding new varieties, planning for a harvest that would see them through the next winter with ease. One warm afternoon in late April, riders approached the cabin. William tensed instinctively, his hand going to his sword, but Zara touched his arm gently. "It's all right," she said. "I know those banners. It's my clan." Indeed, as the riders drew closer, William could see they were orcs, and at their head rode the scarred woman who had officiated the wedding ceremony. She dismounted with fluid grace and approached, her expression unreadable. "Zara Jorah," she said formally, "I am Thora Ironpeak, your mother's sister. I come bearing a message from your family." Zara's face went pale. "Is something wrong? Has someone been hurt?" Thora's stern expression softened slightly. "No, child. Everyone is well. In fact, they are overjoyed. The stories of your marriage have reached us, stories of love and partnership between orc and human. Your mother sent me to see with my own eyes if the tales were true, and if you are happy in your new life." "The tales are true," Zara said, moving to stand beside William and taking his hand. "This is my husband, William. He's a good man, an honorable man, and I love him with all my heart." Thora studied them both for a long moment, her dark eyes missing nothing. William forced himself to meet her gaze steadily, to show no fear or shame. Finally, the orc woman nodded. "I believe you. I can see it in how you stand together, how you touch each other. This is not duty or tolerance. This is true partnership. She reached into her saddlebag and withdrew a small wooden box carved with intricate designs. Your mother sent this. It is a wedding gift, given late but with all her love. Zara took the box with trembling hands. Inside were two items, a silver pendant in the shape of the Iron Peak clan symbol and a worn leather journal filled with her mother's handwriting. She wrote down all her recipes, all her knowledge of healing and herb lore, Thora explained. She said you would need them to make a proper home, and the pendant is to remind you that you are always clan, always family, no matter how far you roam. Tears streamed down Zara's face. Tell her I miss her. Tell her I am happy and loved and building something beautiful here. Tell her I will make her proud. You already have, niece. Thora turned to William. Human, you have done what I thought impossible. You have honored your wife and treated her with respect. For that you have earned the gratitude of the Iron Peak clan. Should you ever need aid, you need only ask. William bowed deeply. Thank you. Your niece has transformed my life. I am the one who is grateful. Thora smiled, a rare expression that softened her scarred features. Perhaps this treaty will work after all. If two people as different as you can find love, maybe there is hope for all of us. The orcs stayed for a meal before departing. William felt the weight of their assessment, but also their gradual acceptance as they saw how he and Zara moved around each other, the small touches and shared smiles that spoke of genuine affection. When they finally rode away, Zara clung to William and wept, overwhelmed by the connection to her family she had thought lost forever. It will be all right, William murmured, stroking her hair. Your mother knows you are loved, and perhaps someday we can visit them, let them see our home, our life together. You would do that, travel into orc lands? I would go anywhere with you, William said simply. You are my home now. Wherever you are, that is where I belong. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long golden days and warm nights filled with stars. The garden flourished under Zara's care, and William built a small addition to the cabin, expanding their living space. They fell into comfortable patterns, their days filled with work and their evenings with companionship. Other treaty couples began to visit, drawn by the stories of William and Zara's success. Some were struggling, the human and orc partners barely able to speak to each other. Others were finding their way but unsure if what they felt was real or just making the best of a bad situation. William and Zara welcomed them all, sharing meals and advice, offering proof that love could bloom even from the most unlikely beginnings. You are giving people hope, William said one night after a particularly difficult couple had left, the orc wife in tears and the human husband clearly at his wit's end. Showing them it is possible. We are giving them hope, Zara corrected. This is not just my victory, William. It is ours. We built this together, and that is what makes it strong. One evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, William turned to Zara with a question he had been pondering for weeks. Do you want children? He asked softly. I know that joining of human and orc blood is rare, that there are no guarantees. But if it were possible, would you want to raise a family with me? Zara was quiet for a long moment, her golden eyes distant. I would, she finally said. I would love to have children with you, to raise them in both traditions, to give them the best of both worlds. But William, if it does not happen, I will not love you less. You are enough for me. You will always be enough. And you are more than enough for me, William replied, kissing her gently. But if we are blessed with children, I promise they will know both their heritages. They will walk proudly in both worlds. As summer faded into autumn, marking a full year since their wedding, William and Zara prepared for another winter. But this time there was no dread, no uncertainty. They worked side by side, storing food and firewood, preparing the cabin and garden for the cold months ahead. And they did it with joy, with laughter, with the easy companionship of two people who had chosen each other not once, but 1,000 times over in countless small ways. On the anniversary of their wedding day, they returned to the crossing stones. William carried flowers from their garden, and Zara wore the silver pendant from her mother. They stood together where they had been joined by treaty and politics, and this time they spoke their own vows. I, William Torrence, choose you, Zara Jorah, William said, his voice strong and clear. Not because any law compels me, but but because you are the best person I have ever known. You are my partner, my teacher, my love. I choose you today and every day for the rest of my life." Zara's eyes glistened with tears. "I, Zara Jorah, choose you, William Torrance. You saw past my tusks and green skin to the woman beneath. You gave me respect when you could have given me nothing. You loved me when I expected only duty. I choose you, now and always, until my last breath." They kissed there at the crossing stones, not as strangers forced together by necessity, but as lovers committing themselves freely to a shared future. The sun broke through the clouds as they embraced, bathing them both in golden light, and it felt like a blessing. As they walked back to their cabin hand in hand, Zara paused to look back at the crossing stones. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "That day when the courier came with the treaty papers, do you wish things had been different?" William considered the question seriously, thinking back to the terrified man he had been a year ago, staring at a parchment that had upended his entire world. Then he looked at the woman beside him, strong and beautiful and beloved beyond measure. And he smiled. "No," he said firmly, "not for a single moment. That treaty, that forced marriage, that moment of terror and uncertainty, they all led me to you. And I would walk through fire for that chance, Zara. I would choose you again in every lifetime, in every world. Even though I lift my veil and you see my orcish face?" "Especially because of your face," William said, cupping her cheek tenderly. "The moment you lifted that veil, my fate was sealed. One look at your golden eyes, and my heart was yours. It just took my head a little while to catch up." Zara laughed and pulled him close, and they stood there in the fading afternoon light, two people who had been strangers made into spouses by politics and transformed into soulmates by choice. Around them, the borderlands stretched out in gentle hills and dense forests, no longer a boundary between enemies, but a bridge between worlds. Inside their cabin, the fire would be waiting, and the dinner Zara had prepared that morning, and the life they had built together from nothing but determination and hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new prejudices to face, new battles to fight. But tonight, they had each other, and love that had been forged in the crucible of impossible circumstances, and the certain knowledge that together they could weather anything. William had been wed by treaty to an orc woman he had never seen, and when she lifted her veil, he had indeed lost his heart. But in losing his heart, he had gained everything: a partner, a purpose, a love that transcended the boundaries of species and culture. And as he followed Zara into their home, closing the door against the autumn chill, he knew with absolute certainty that he was the luckiest man in all the borderlands. The years ahead would prove him right. Word of their marriage spread throughout both human and orc territories, becoming a symbol of hope for the treaty and proof that peace was possible. Other couples found courage in their example, and slowly, grudgingly, acceptance began to grow. There were still those who opposed the unions, still violence and hatred to overcome. But William and Zara faced it all together, their love a shelter against the storm. They never had children, as it turned out, the mixing of human and orc blood too rare to grant them that blessing. But they filled their home with warmth and laughter anyway, fostering treaty orphans from both sides who needed a place to belong. They taught these children to be bridges between worlds, to carry both heritages with pride, to see the beauty and difference rather than the threat. And on cold winter nights, when the children were finally asleep and the cabin was quiet, William and Zara would sit by the fires they had on that first solstice. They would hold hands and share quiet conversation and marvel at the journey that had brought them together. From strangers to spouses to soulmates, from duty to choice to love that would last until their final days. It had all begun with a treaty, with a veiled woman at the crossing stones, with fear and uncertainty and the courage to try. And it had become something beautiful, something worth fighting for, something that would echo through the generations as proof that love, real love, can bloom in the most unlikely places. All it takes is an open heart and the willingness to look beyond what you have been taught to fear, to see not a monster or an enemy, but a person. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that person will become your whole world. William Torrance had been that lucky, And as he kissed his wife good night and banked the fire for one more evening, he whispered a prayer of gratitude to whatever fate had chosen his name from that lottery, had given him the greatest gift of his life, disguised as a burden, had led him to the love that had transformed everything. The treaty had wed him to an orc woman he had never seen. She had lifted her veil, and he had lost his heart. And in losing it, he had found his home.